2-minute warning, ladies and gentlemen. 2-minute warning. Also, a reminder: there's food in the back there. Please help yourself to your box dinner, I guess. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you would kindly take your seats. Good evening. My name is Greg Odell. I'm a president and CEO of Events DC, which means nothing. It means I'm a head janitor of Events DC. But we're so delighted to have everybody here, and thank you for taking the time to come out this evening. I know the weather keeps changing on us, so it went from nice to getting cold tonight. So we appreciate that you took the time to be with us. A couple things. And so we changed the format a little differently. We wanted to be a little bit efficient in our time, so we wanted to spend the first part of this meeting talking about the redevelopment of RFK campus. So we'll spend some time first reorienting those who had spent some time in the past with us, but also for any new folks to quickly overview and then get into what the latest updates are for that project. And then we'll also go into some discussion about the updates on our RFK campus, and you have some materials in front of you. So we'll make a distinct break before we go into that portion. For those who may not want to stick around for that portion, we certainly want to be mindful of your time, but we'll start off with the projects first. So I want to direct your attention to the screen, and first we should thank St. Luke's for hosting us. Wonderful facility and a beautiful church. We're glad to be here. I personally am always comforted by being in a basketball gym for obvious reasons, but we're really, really appreciative that they would allow us to be here tonight. So I started with my introduction. We have a wonderful team here. For those who know most of our team, first in the middle, Eric Moses is our Senior Vice President of Sports and Entertainment for Events DC, which includes not only sports programming, but also the venues, and part of that venue is the RFK campus as well. That's why we're here today. Directly to my right is Will Liebner. Will is one of our project managers who handles many of our strategic initiatives, particularly working on this project as well. He's also joined by Ryan Conaway, who's also one of our project managers who's been working on this RFK project. We have many other staff and consultants that are also here in the room that have been working on this project, and certainly as they speak, we can make sure you know who they are. So quickly, as I said, we're going to talk about the RFK campus development project. We'll also stop and make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A, and then we'll take a quick break and then move into the upcoming events as well. So if that sounds good, we'll jump right in. So as I mentioned, we've been working with you all and certainly with various stakeholders about this RFK redevelopment process. And as you all may recall, there was lots of discussion, and also we did some preliminary planning about a long-term vision for this site. And that long-term vision included, different anchor tenant scenarios that may have had a football stadium, may have had the kind of reimagining of another Verizon Center, Capital One, a 20,000-seat arena, and then a third scenario that had neither one of those. And so I just want to say that to orient everybody that that long-term plan was done. We actually stopped that long-term process. And so what we've focused on, and we wanted to bifurcate and go into a path of focusing on the short-term elements. So what could we do on this campus now that the community could enjoy, the city could enjoy, and even regionally, it'd be an asset for people to come enjoy. And so those are the 5 things in the last few meetings that we've focused on. So next slide, I'll jump right in. Really was to just, again, to remind everybody what those 5 elements are that we're focused on. So we're not focused on any long-term plan right now. We want to actually get these actual elements done and so that everybody can enjoy them. So the community fields, and we're going to spend probably the most time on the fields today because that's the one we think is going to happen the quickest, and we want that to get done so we can start converting some of that asphalt to green space. And I apologize. I'll make sure I turn so everybody can hear me. The market hall, and we'll show some imagery again of what that market hall looks like, and then also the sports recreation complex, some pedestrian bridges that will have better connectivity to and from that site, and then the RFK Memorial. So just to remind everybody, those are the 5 short-term elements that we've been sharing with the community for a while and getting some feedback, and we want to start to look to refine that program and even get to starting to implement some of them, particularly on the fields as well. So a couple of things we wanted to update you on what we've been working on. I think I'd shared in our last community meeting that part of our opportunity, if you will, is that we have a federal lease with, at least with the federal government, specifically with the National Park Service. And so in that, we probably have about 22, 23 years left. And so for us to do lots of this great programming that we want to do, it's going to require significant investment and probably financing as well. And so if we're going to finance, typically they want a longer extended period of time so that you can finance those projects. And so we need either one of 2 things, a conveyance of that land to the district or a lease extension that will allow us to build all these things and justify the investment that will need to be made. So if you'll look on the screen, you'll see particularly on bullet number 2, when we did our outreach and working with our congresswoman, she actually proposed to extend the lease. And so there is a proposed bill or legislation that's out there to extend the lease by 50 years. As you all may also be aware, we Events DC had the honor or privilege of testifying before Congress to speak about this bill. And one of the things that we were supportive of the bill and certainly appreciative and supportive of the Congresswoman, but one of the things that we wanted to make sure was clear that there was no ambiguity about our ability to do these types of programs on that site. So our only suggestion to them is that if they extend the lease, we want to make sure that there may be some clarifying language that says we can do all these different types of program. So that was one thing that we clarified with the Congresswoman, and that's one thing that we're seeking to do. So you'll also see in the next bullet, we work closely with not only the members of Congress and their staff, but we also work with the Federal Regional Affairs Office, which is part of the mayor's office. And so led by a woman named Beverly Perry, we just made sure we were working closely with them to coordinate our outreach. And as I shared last time in the community, we want to make sure we told you all what we were doing. So we've been conducting those meetings consistent with either getting that bill passed or even getting a markup where we can have some clarification on that language. So I just wanted to make sure that, again, everyone was aware of our outreach and what we've been doing. I think I'd shared last time we even hired a lobbyist to help us with those efforts. So that person helped set up a lot of those meetings so that we could actually conduct those discussions. So I just wanted to make sure we gave everybody an update on that as well. So the next step that we've also been doing, or task that we've been performing, was the regulatory process. So this regulatory process, at the end of the day, we're going to have to go through a regulatory process and an environmental process for the entire site. But what we want to do is see if we can expedite this process, particularly for the fields. And so we know that, as you all can see, and a lot of you who live in Washington, D.C. can appreciate that there's an extensive process going through the federal agencies, but also an extensive process with the local jurisdiction as well. And so you'll see, and I won't go through all of it, but we've initiated this process, and we have to work directly with the National Park Service, and we're happy to do that. We've conducted several meetings with them, and so they are advising us in the process. And so there's a NEPA process, which is that National Environmental Policy Act, that you have to go through, which is a pretty extensive process There is some ways that you can actually expedite that process. So there's what's called a categorical exclusion. And so we are seeking that process to actually get these fields done. And we feel that the National Park Service is also supportive of this because they really want these fields done as well. So we're happy that everyone's on the same page. Having said that, there'll still be lots of different federal agencies we'll have to go through. So we've listed some of them that we've already started some of those meetings, particularly with the Commission on Fine Arts and NCPC. And then on the local side, we'll also have to start talking to some of the agencies like the Department of Energy and Environment, and then also Office of Planning. And so we've begun to address or set up some of those meetings and start to hear what their requirements will be and what processes we have to go through. Next slide. So I wanted to show you all again visually from a site plan perspective, again, where those 5 elements are. So you'll see, and I'll kind of walk out and point, you'll see at least in the red circles and above are the community fields. And this was the original plan. I want to show this because we're actually going to change or show you the revised configuration of those fields. But as you recall, we had the fields to the north, and converting a lot of those asphalt parking lots to grass. The yellow circle was where that market hall was, and it was intentional to be up there in close proximity to the fields, so that we obviously would have some concessions and some food experiences that would complement the fields and all the activities there. The blue circles represent the pedestrian bridges, and then to the south, the red circle was that sports and recreation complex. And then last, just to orient you, not necessarily set in stone for where the memorial would be, but we think that's a logical location, but we are not anywhere near even the conceptual design or even a location for that yet, but that was some of our initial plans. If we go to the next slide, just shows you the same elements, but a slightly different configuration. Again, we spent some time, you can go back, we spent some time working with members of the community, particularly CRISP. I want to give them a shout out. They were very helpful in helping us to refine the program and what the program for these fields would look like. As we said before, and I know many of you will appreciate this even more than I do, we have a scarcity of fields in this community and across the city. By no means will adding some fields at RFK correct that problem for the entire city, but certainly it will help relieve some of that pressure valve. And so we wanted to, one, add some more fields, but also figure out a way that we could be economical and be efficient with them so that there's multi-purpose use. And one thing that I think Chris also was very helpful with was also figuring out how we are servicing children at different levels. And so you don't need an entire field, for the younger children that are playing. And so there's a way that these fields can be divisible to even better optimize those fields. So some of the things, we'll get a little more detail about the fields, but that was something that was critical that we wanted to address. I'm going to stop here because I want not to hog the mic, but I also wanted Ryan, our project manager, to go into a little more detail about the fields as well. Ryan?
Thanks, Greg. I think as Greg mentioned, as we've sort of moved from master planning into concept design and now into schematics for the fields, we have had the opportunity to sort of hone in more on the program, understanding from a technical perspective, what we're looking at and what the plan includes. And the program has expanded since we've been working with CRISP and sort of listened to the community and various agencies in terms of feedback. And so what you can see here is sort of a bullet point list of the actual program. So 2 full-sized artificial turf fields. These were expanded, as Greg mentioned, to accommodate 2 games per field. So going from 3 fields before where we could accommodate 3 games, now having 3 fields we can accommodate 6 games. So the fields were expanded to accommodate multi-games. As well as storage and maintenance facilities to support the operation of those fields. Obviously, you have to have maintenance for equipment and such, as well as restroom facilities for public use. Maximizing green space, so understanding what it would look like to have space in between the fields, making sure that there's areas for warm-ups before practices, but also green space for people to utilize on non-game day. Introducing bioretention as we started to look at the concept and move into schematics and understand what we needed to do in terms of stormwater management. Introducing bioretention as part of that program. and looking at various amenities as part of this project, including pedestrian bike paths to connect the communities to the north to the site, making connections from those paths down to the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail, which we knew the community wanted to see. The introduction of a celebration pavilion, I'll talk a little bit more about that when I pull up the site plan here, and adding a playground, not only for the community to use, but it's also important if there's tournaments for soccer or lacrosse and the like, to have something for families to use in between games, or folks to take their kids that aren't participating in the tournament.
I want to just quickly interrupt for a second. I know a lot of people are taking pictures, and certainly you're more than welcome, but we're also going to post this entire presentation on our website, as we do for all of them, at rfkcampusfuture.com. So did I get that right? I think that's right. All right. So just so you know, feel free to take pictures, but want to let you know it'll also be posted.
So this site plan shows the current concept, which we are advancing into schematic design. And this shows a little bit more detail of the program that I just described. Just starting from the top, you can see an access road that connects to Oklahoma Ave. One of the concerns was the road previously used to be along the river. This provides the same access. It actually minimizes the amount of construction that we have to implement as part of this project. It maintains the connectivity not only to this project, but to future projects, and connects the site, we think, just as well as the previous design. You can see the fields, how they're orientated. Field 1 is a soccer field. Field 2 is soccer and lacrosse, as well as 2 Little League baseball diamonds. And Field 3 to the south is soccer. I've noted where the bioretention facilities are, and the park space that's spread out in between the fields. And you can also see where the plaza and the pavilion is relative to field number 2. And the celebration pavilion, we feel, is a critical part of the program, allowing us to have space for community events, to support tournaments in terms of trophy ceremonies, in terms of food and beverage, temporary food and beverage facilities that could be placed underneath the pavilion. 315 parking spaces. Currently, that is existing. We would mill and overlay that as part of this project. And you could see there, I've noted the existing Anacostia Riverwalk Trail and the connections. So as Greg mentioned, we are still in concept design. So these are images of our vision for the celebration pavilion, the playground, and the support buildings. We'll, of course, refine these as we move into permit drawings, but this is sort of our first pass at our vision for those 3 components of the program. In terms of, more specifically, the current activities that we're undertaking, we have a set of schematic designs that we've developed along with design specifications. They're informed by geotechnical investigations that we did to understand footings and what's underneath the asphalt paving in terms of where our buildings are going and the support structures. We're currently in the process of preparing a request for proposal, an RFP for design build services. And that would be for a designer and a contractor team to take the schematic designs or the bridging documents to a permit set, and then, of course, construct the project. At the same time, we've initiated discussions with DDOT to complete a comprehensive transportation review that not only factors in the Fields project, but also factors in making sure that we're accommodating the long-term vision, whatever that may be. Not just being short-sighted, but making sure that whatever roads that we build in the short term have the ability to be expanded and connected to roads that we would build in the future. Currently engaging CFA and the Historic Preservation Office, as well as continuing to engage groups such as CRISP and the community to get feedback on design. As part of this process, we've completed a phase 1 environmental assessment, and we are currently finalizing the phase 2, which is the recommended next step coming out of the phase 1. The nice thing about the site is it's relatively flat, so our design currently mitigates excavation work that is part of the project. But we do know that there will be some level of remediation that will be required as part of the project, but that any contaminated soils that would be generated during any grading activities and construction will be removed and disposed of at off-site permitted facilities. We're still working through the details of what that plan would look like. We'll work with DOEE and other regulatory bodies on the exact plan, but at this point in the phase of the project, that's what we're looking at. In terms of more detailed next steps, I mentioned the design build RFP. We're looking to issue that this month, so between now and next week. Awarding the contract sometime in the spring with hopefully permit approvals this summer, and then having the fields open for play the spring of 2019.
So I'll stop there and make sure everyone gets a chance to absorb. And again, we'll send this presentation. But this is the one, that we want to, I think, collectively push to get it done the quickest. As Ryan just alluded to towards the end, the construction is probably the least intrusive. So even though we may have to do some excavation, it certainly won't be deep excavation that we can mitigate whatever potential environmental issues we have. And so if all goes well, we will get through the permitting process through this summer, and then obviously we'll start construction. And by the end of winter and early spring, we want everybody out enjoying these fields. That is the plan. So we want everyone to be excited about it. So we'll keep everybody informed as to the progress we're making, particularly on the regulatory process, and even any environmental concerns as we find out what and how we have to mitigate them. But we're excited. This is the first one out of the gate, and this is converting some of that asphalt to green space that actually the community can use. So we're excited. So this is, just want to make sure we pause here and make sure everybody knows this is the target schedule that we want to hit. So the next couple slides, just to refresh what the other elements are. And admittedly, we are not, as I've shared with you before, we want to make sure we are intentional about moving slow, or at least informing you all as to what we're doing. So we showed you all initial concepts of what the market hall could look like. If you go to the next slide, Ryan, really gives you kind of a better depiction of what those elements could be. So think of specialty foods, certainly staple grocery, even some garden, community garden areas as well. But we've only done this design and what we showed you as a concept. The next step, and just as we work with the community, particularly with entities like CRISP, we want to make sure, and I've talked to some of the ANC leadership, we want to make sure we get our advisory committees in place and that we get feedback from those who want to participate in either an advisory committee that advises us on the market hall or the sports and recreation complex or some of the other elements. And so we'll make sure we finalize and get everyone's participation as to who wants to actually sign up for those advisory committees. So just quickly, some imagery. This is the market hall that we showed you before. That's what it looks like. A light structure, but open air with a mezzanine for some light dining, and then lots of good activity on the ground level. So the sports and recreation complex, for those who may be new, this is a concept that we really spent some time looking at the market demographics and what type of activity we could have on the campus that would house amateur sports, but equally important, also after-school programming. There are the market supports in a 50-minute drive radius, in addition to obviously our local community, that we could actually even have people come enjoy this facility. So we obviously want to make sure that the community benefits first and that there's amenities for the community to do that, but we recognize that we also can make this a destination draw as well. So we did some studies as to what that particular programming could look like. By no means is it finalized right now. We're certainly going to look for partners to help us do that. And those partners would not only make sure that it services community, but it also has to be financially feasible. And for those who've been here from the beginning, you've heard me harp on that, that anybody we partner with is also going to make sure that this program works. And so there's a part of this that will serve the community and it'll be at no cost, but there's also a part of it that's also going to have to drive some revenue to justify the investment. So as we obviously refine the program, that financial feasibility will also be a layer of that as well. This just shows you another imagery and some imagery inside of what that potential could look like. So for these two elements, again, not as far advanced as the fields. We want to set up those advisory committees and get feedback. But we also want to then start to put out a solicitation on the street. And instead of an RFP, which is a hard, fast scope, we want to actually put out what's called an RFEI. And that actually really just allows us to get interest from parties, interested parties, to see who might be willing to partner with us. And the good news about that is that we have a concept in place, but those partners also can come and propose some other creative things that we may not have thought about. And so as we go through that process, we'll also share with the community, and we'll certainly have members on the advisory committee that will help us through that process as well. So we anticipate, again, not anytime soon, but sequentially, we'll issue the RFEIs for those later in the year, and then we're talking a much later date in terms of actual delivery. But again, we'll come back to the community every step of the way. And for all those elements that I described, particularly as it relates to the regulatory process and environmental process, we'll have to go through the same processes for those two elements as well. Next slide, pedestrian bridges. Again, we talked about a concept of connectivity. We have not actually even started the conceptual design process. We did reach out to the regulatory bodies. We are aware that we're also going to have to engage the Army Corps of Engineers for this particular effort. So we know it's going to take some time, but we will start that process as well, and then also start to advance the design. We heard a great comment earlier that we got some feedback that one of the concerns might be about making sure that the bridges can be raised and the boaters may have a concern about access. And so great point, but that's exactly the type of feedback that we're going to need as we start to advance the design as well. Next slide. And you can go to the next concept. So the last concept, we'd shared before that certainly at the end of the day, if we're going to be raising or demolishing the stadium potentially, one of the things that we need to do is figure out how we're going to honor the legacy of the late senator for which the building was named. And so we have engaged the family, as I shared probably in our last couple of community meetings. They've been very excited about this process and have jumped in with 2 feet. In fact, Maeve, who I don't think is here tonight, but the granddaughter of the late senator, has been actively engaged and comes to a lot of these community meetings as well. So this process is going to take some time. The first thing we really wanted to do is start to develop the program and figure out conceptually what this should be. And so we say memorial, but you all know memorial has a very generic term. And so in talking to the family, I think they are very passionate about it being representative of his legacy and what he stood for. And so we think it may be a democracy center or something to that in that vein, but nothing's been decided yet. And as we start to develop that concept, we're going to come to the community and share with you what some preliminary concepts will look like. And so we've literally just had a workshop, and we also had some of the team go visit other different memorials, museums, to get an idea or different ideas of what we could start to do to develop the program. The one thing I will say that this is critical, and everyone who lives in Washington, D.C. here knows this, we have lots of museums around here, but it's very difficult to sustain those museums. And so whatever we do, we have to figure out not only raise enough money to build it, but we're also going to have to make sure there's enough money to operationally sustain it, which is no easy feat. So I say it will be a bit of an iterative process, because we can design a great big 50,000 square foot building and think it's great. And if it doesn't work financially, then we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and actually start to look at how we'll refine that design to make sure it's sustainable. So that is something that I will tell you we are very focused on. It will allow me to lose sleep and lose whatever hair I have in my head, because unfortunately, some of the existing museums that we all love in the city are suffering right now because they are not sustainable. So that's something that we want to address on the front end, so that we're not building something and then suffer at the end as a result of making sure we didn't address that. So early discussions with the family to think about what that concept looks like. Once we start to get some actual visuals and some concepts to share with you, Hopefully, I think we projected probably in the fall that maybe we may have something to share, but we'll make sure we share that with the community because we're equally excited about that concept as well. You'll see in the last bullet, it will require congressional approval through the Commemorative Works Act as well. Reading between the lines, that's going to be a very long process to go through. So that one we know will probably take quite some time. And if anyone who's read the papers or seen some of the other memorials, like the Eisenhower Memorial, it's gone through a pretty long process. And so we're prepared to do that, but we think it's the right thing to do. And we'll obviously have lots to do along the way as well. Just lastly, I mentioned there the timing of which, and there'll be, again, extensive regulatory process as well. So next steps, we're going to continue to work with our federal partners in pursuing this site control issue. So as I share with you, what will likely happen, or what we'll hope will happen, is that the members will actually go through a markup of that bill. And so the only thing that we're really requesting, if they do that, is to make sure there's clarification language that it's flexible enough that someone interprets those uses that will be compliant with the lease. And so as an example, if we want to build a sports and recreation complex, if we want to build a market hall, that there's no ambiguity and that anyone who interprets the lease and says, yes, that's okay to build there. And that's what we're seeking. We're not seeking building anything else, but we want to make sure that we have some flexibility for the uses that we're proposing. Last, we'll continue to go through the regulatory process, but then also those programs I just described that may not be as advanced as the fields. We're obviously going to continue to work with the community and particularly set up those advisory committees, which is key to get your feedback. So I'm going to stop here. It was a lot, I know, to go through, but we want time for some questions and answers period. So with that, I think Chignetti's in the back, but there's 2 mics here, so maybe the easiest thing, are we going to just have people come to the mics? Okay, so if you don't mind, if you could come to the mics with your questions, that would be great.
Hey, Greg. Mic on? All right, so everybody, my name is Denise Krepp. I'm the ANC Commissioner for 6B10. My SMD goes from 15th to 19th East Cap down to Massachusetts, so we're very close to a couple of the concepts. Here tonight to say thank you very much for talking about the Redskins. My residents don't want them back. So I just, no NFL at RFK. So that's the first message. Second message, talking about the sports and recreation complex. The mayor last fall announced that the property that's immediately adjacent to what you're proposing is being offered up to Amazon. So the question I have for you tonight is, are you part of the partners that the mayor is offering up to Amazon, which was blacked out in the FOIA that WAMU received?
So we are not part of, let me back up. The mayor certainly is aware of the vision and supports this short-term plan for what we're doing, but we weren't in any way partners or part of that proposal as it relates to the content to what was offered.
Okay, thank you. With regards to that property, given the fact that we have Amazon that is being offered up, DC General that is coming down, two properties that are being built, I would request that you attend a Hill East meeting that we're going to be holding this spring so we can talk about what this waterfront looks like, because it's very disjointed right now.
Well, thank you for that, Denise. And one of the things that you had mentioned in the past that we did previously that we want to do on a regular basis is the coordination with DDOT for both our meetings and their meetings. So in addition to attending, we're also now going to meet with DDOT on a very regular basis, weekly basis, frankly, for this project. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Francis Campbell. I'm a resident of Burke Street. First of all, you have an ambitious plan for putting up the fields, but on a more realistic note, you're talking about having this done by 2019. So a couple of questions. When you do this, are you going to put in the restroom facilities beforehand? Because you're going to put in fields, and realistically, you're going to have hundreds of people down there playing, and I certainly don't want them all going down behind the woods off of the service road. So are you envisioning putting in a restroom facility where your, the market hall is going to be? Are you tying into the septic system and the existing septic system, or are you going to put in something along the line of a septic tank? I mean, I'm curious as to how you're going to handle all that, because you're talking about putting in fields and having them open by the use in 2019 and having hundreds of people come down to use that, but no mention about facilities.
Sure. So I'll take the easy one first. We'll definitely have the restroom done by the time we actually envision having people in there. And you make a good point. There obviously, even during construction, we need to make sure there's temporary facilities there so they're not impacting the neighborhood. As it relates to the engineering or the plumbing of how we're going to handle that, we have not gone into that level of detail as to whether it be a septic or we'll tie into an existing system. You make a good point. There's obviously a long run for where that plumbing would go, and looking at the topography and grade, we'd have to study and figure out what makes sense. But there are systems that that we can accommodate locally there on the site to do that if we have to.
Okay, one additional question. Is any of this area in the floodplain, and if so, how is that going to impact your construction?
It does. So the floodplain, I believe, it is in the floodplain area. The good news about these fields that Ryan made reference to is that because we're not doing any deep excavation, that we actually can mitigate the remediation or the concerns environmentally pretty easily, because we're actually can, frankly, not have to worry about disturbing and even affecting the water table for probably where we're going. Level, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. We'll do.
Hi there, Stephen Varga, land use planner at Cozen O'Connor. Thank you for the presentation. Unfortunately, I walked in a little bit late, so hopefully you didn't talk about this when I missed it. My understanding is that back in about 2003, NCPC approved a plan for the property, and I'm wondering what kind of conversations you may have had with them recently regarding some of the differences between some of the elements that they had in place versus some of the ones that are being proposed now that are on the website. For instance, they have a housing component, and there's some other elements too that differ somewhat. I'm just wondering at what stage that conversation's at.
No, very good question. And so we have met with NCPC and shared our plan. And the only clarification is obviously NCPC had proposed alternatives for that site. So there was nothing etched in stone as to what that plan would be, but we share with them some elements, and there's some consistency, but to your point, there's also some departures from what they proposed. For our perspective, and we share this with the community, we believe, one, there's restrictions on the lease, and so the restrictions on the lease didn't, frankly, contemplate or allow those uses that they proposed. And we think for what we heard in the discussions we've had, that these are the appropriate uses that will service the community.
Okay. Great, thank you.
My name is Bill Sisolak, resident of Capitol Hill. My wife and I have been on the Hill for over 50 years. Two comments. One, during the construction phase, the good news is that this site sits right on 295, but make absolutely certain that dump trucks do not come through the neighborhoods on both sides of the river, okay? And number two, we are longtime members of Capitol Hill Village. I don't know if you're familiar with the village or...
We actually met with them.
Okay. Just for those in the audience who may not know who we are, we're a 10-year organization, aging in community. My wife and I are both former board members. As you build these facilities, think not only of making them ADA compliant, but also facilities and access that are appropriate for seniors.
Thank you for your comment. I'll start with the latter. We met with them, and to your point, they had great suggestions, even within the context of some of the program elements for things we could add or enhance that would be appealing to everybody. So thank you for that, and we'll make sure we circle back with them. The second comment, you make a great point, and admittedly we're not there yet, but we need to address not only the infrastructure in terms of transportation access when it's open, but also on a temporary basis during construction. So appreciate your feedback. We're not there yet, but we will address that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Hatfield. I live at Lincoln Park, which is 11th and East Capitol Street. And as a neighbor of this property, I have concerns, and some of them I want to bring up is the traffic. It being near 295, like the gentleman had said, it can be a nightmare trying to come off 295, and if there's an event and traffic isn't moving, I've sat on that bridge for an hour and you can't move, and that's dangerous as far as emergencies. It's gridlock. Cars are just parked. So to me, this says this isn't a good idea that I would be happy about. So the traffic, local traffic, freeway on and off, parking, a lot more parking. Also, who's going to pay for this? You know, it's got to be not only the construction, but also after. It's got to be a budget to manage this, to clean up the insurance. So if somebody jumps off the bridge and they sue us for millions or billions of dollars, are the taxpayers going to have to pay for this? Because we already have, like the 11th Street pedestrian bridge, $27 million that we were told, well, the city will pay for it. Well, the city means we pay for it. Taxpayers pay for it. So that's just something so people can walk. The city does a very good job at spending our tax money. So not only to build it, I mean, did you cover that? Did I miss that? Who's going to pay for this?
I haven't. I'll address that.
Okay. Finance, the sustainable. Give me a minute. Clean up also the effect to our police force and fire, because when they built the baseball stadium, the city provides free police force to manage the traffic and crime and any problems, so that will also impact our cost, because I think that's something that we have to consider in the budget. And is there a way, if it does have to be paid for, rather than hit the taxpayers, maybe you could float some bonds or some other way to pay for it, or in advertising, if we could have sponsors, maybe put their name on some things. So just ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I'll try to make sure I address each one. So for traffic, the good news is, and you may not want to hear me say it, but I'll say it, is at least this area and this footprint was designed to bring people in mass. The good news is we're not bringing everyone in mass for this short-term programming at 40,000 people at one time and leaving in mass. At least for now, we're going to have different elements of programs. So we recognize there needs to be a new road network that actually has to have access to those different parcels, but also that envisions having a new network for getting people to and from and outside that. So we have Road Slave, who's done some preliminary studies for us to look at what that road configuration will look like. We've already started to make some changes, at least as it relates to even the road network that we showed that's running parallel to the fields. But we're not final there, but what we'll do as part of the advisory committees is we'll actually set up an infrastructure team to walk everyone through that. In our previous community meeting, and we didn't show it tonight, we had proposed what a new network would look like, a road network. And so we'll go back and show you what we think is things that will mitigate or address those issues as well. But we feel like that is a way that we'll have a better traffic pattern there.
My concern is a lot of activities going on. I mean, just one concert at Arcade Stadium can bring it to gridlock.
Sure.
And then it's backed up both ways on 295. And if you have all these things going on at the same time and everybody wants to go on Saturday night or whatever,
Sure.
I mean, it's going to create a gridlock, you know, traffic
I mean, I can't
nightmare,
promise that there won't be
especially
any
rush hour.
traffic, but we think we're building or suggesting or proposing a new network that will improve some of that. So we'll have to show you some detail of what that will look like and show you some of the studies that we performed.
Okay.
Okay.
Because it's also a part of the emergency evacuation route
Sure.
that goes through there. So just to be concerned, we are
Sure.
target.
No,
Okay.
well taken, and we have to, as the landlord now, we have to be concerned with those issues, and so we'll make sure we address them consistently as well. Thank you.
Okay.
So let me get to a couple of your other points that you
Okay.
made. So who's going to pay? So we had proposed, and again, we didn't want to regurgitate the entire presentation before, so I'm sorry that we didn't. I will say some of that is on our website that you can visit, but in simple terms, the Events DC, we are the Convention and Sports Authority for the city. It's important to note that we're an independent authority of the city, that we don't get direct tax dollars. We're actually set up to collect a portion of hotel tax and restaurant tax. And so those are for the people from a tourism perspective that come here. So our money is raised by the tourism dollars that we generate from an economic development perspective, and also any revenue that we generate directly from our events. And so all that we propose, these 5 elements, we estimate will probably be about anywhere from $450 to $500 million. We think about half of those dollars would probably come from Events DC or from some seed money, but we also believe we'll leverage that for private partners to help pay for a lot of these projects. Similarly, on the operations side, we think that there will be operational partners that would, again, as I spoke to some of those elements, they have to pay for themselves, and so there'll be programming where they will make revenue that will pay for the operations. But in some cases, we may also, in our capacity as we do now, also provide some subsidy to provide some of this programming for the community. Okay?
Okay. So it sounds like the dollars are going to come from tourists, hopefully.
Some
Tax.
from our tourism dollars that we generate, but some also from private partnerships that we intend to develop.
But to get it started, is any of this coming from taxes?
It is not coming from the general fund from the city. It'll only be coming from Events DC, which are only hotel taxes and the restaurant taxes that we collect as a result of our efforts to promote tourism and drive tourism here. Yeah,
Okay.
Which is what we do now and what's generated now.
Okay. There still could be impact for the city for
Yeah, we
police
got
and
to,
fire.
I'm sorry, we're going to have, I'm happy to talk to you offline,
Okay,
but we
okay.
got a few other people ask
Okay,
questions, so I
thank you.
apologize. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Dell, I'm John Capozzi, resident of Ward 7, and formerly of Barney Circle as well. And so I'm thrilled to see the proposal you have for the fields and the 2019 date. It's something, as you know, we've been working on for a number of years. And in terms of progress, one of the things, and you talked about the financial aspect, which is something I certainly care about, and I want to echo the ANC commissioner in terms of the NFL, which is, I guess I'm not as concerned with the NFL. I'm concerned with public money being paid for a stadium. So I haven't seen Events DC make a pledge that they would not put public dollars toward a stadium, whether that's TAC dollars or Events DC dollars. And when you explain it, one thing I would want to mention is that hotel and restaurant tax would go to the general fund if it wasn't going to Events DC. So in essence, it is tax dollars that are going to Events DC because that money would otherwise go to the general fund.
But the money otherwise wouldn't be generated if it wasn't for our efforts also. So you
Well,
have to, yeah.
Listen, I appreciate your efforts in generating more money, but the fact is, you know, when it's
It's a but for. Like if what we do is incremental to the city, if we didn't generate the events we do and drive tourism here, just to give you round numbers, the convention center alone, we probably have 1 million visitors who come through our doors. And that any year is about $300 to $400 million in direct spend for the city that then comes back in taxes. So you can't necessarily say that something that would no longer exist if we didn't do that would go to the city, because it wouldn't if we didn't complete our efforts. So
Right.
just
Yeah.
want to be clear on that.
And from what I understand, though, that you're in essence saying that you're cash poor in a sense that these efforts will not all be paid for by Events DC, but you have to bring in other partners to do that. And so what I'm concerned about is that if that's the case, then let's say a group that doesn't have any money or is a nonprofit group, how would they be able to participate if they don't have the cash to do that? Sure. And then,
Can I address that before you go to the next one?
well, no, I want to hear about the pledge to not put public financing toward the NFL. I wanted to see if that's something you guys
Sure.
would do tonight.
It's not something I'm going to do. What we've done from day one is said we're agnostic to what that plan will be. Our job is actually to work with all stakeholders, including the mayor's office and everyone else. And so what I've told you today is that we're focused on the short-term elements. We have made no decision on the long-term elements, so I'm not making a decision for or against it. And so, and I certainly won't make a decision or speak on behalf of the mayor and what her desires are. So I just want to be clear with everybody and answer as clear as possible that we're making no determination one way or the other.
So in essence, there could be public financing for a NFL stadium, is what you're saying.
Could be, but it's not my call.
Okay, fair enough. And then in terms of the partners that you recommended, I do want to make sure that you guys are looking at a couple other elements, which is the Park Road that's still on the DDOT plans in terms of, behind where the cemetery is, for example. And then also there is a plan for a new jail that's going to be coming up on the other side. And again, since this land seems to be getting promised to other people, like it's Amazon, for example, and others, I just want to make sure that you're aware of all those elements and can support those if that's something that comes about. Thank you.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. And you made one comment that I want to address that was a good one. So the fact that we are an independent authority, we are and still part of the district. And so for all these elements, we do want a component that will be accessible to those nonprofits that you spoke of. So that is something that we're cognizant of, whether it's the fields or otherwise, that we want to make sure that we are accessible to them.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, good evening.
I feel like I'm the only one answering questions over here.
No, thank you. You're doing a great job. I'm also a resident of Ward 6, Capitol Hill, between the 15th and 19th Street area. Today, in my neighborhood, we lost a great gentleman who's been a great mentor to a lot of young black men in our community. His name was Mr. Garfield. It saddened a lot of us to lose him today, you know, because he's been a pillar of our community. And to see him every day on his porch and speak with him and just learn how to grow and be a young man has driven me to work with those other community organizations and be a part of my neighborhood and speak here today for those like my grandmother and my other young male peers, millennial peers who aren't here today, but they may be outside or they may be where they are working the type of jobs that are going to, you know, be the $10, $50, $12 a day is supporting. I hope that is an economic opportunity. But I hope every door gets knocked on in my 6B area between 15th and 19th Street. And I hope we all have the opportunity to be able to come in here and listen, because I work in the local schools in the area, and pamphlets like this, the real parents who are going to be taking their kids to stuff like that, aren't seeing a lot of this information. So I saw it on Facebook, and I shared it with the link with as many people in my community as possible. So I hope that information continues to get out to all of us. And thank you.
First, thank you for your comments, and sorry for your loss. But please, if you don't mind, afterwards, if there's ideas of better outreach or ways we can reach people, we'd love to hear it.
Definitely. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. I am ANC Commissioner Joanne Prue for 7004, the River Terrace community. And please forgive me for being late, but I'm here, and I was here on time to ask these questions. I'm concerned about the breaking of the grounds that I've been told that is coming late March and early April, is that correct? And about the footbridge that would be leading from Kingman Park to the River Terrace or River Terrace to Kingman Park. Are you aware?
If that's the case, ma'am, it's not us. It would be maybe the
It's
folks.
not you all?
It is not. But we can certainly circle back with you if the district or Living Classrooms is doing anything on Kingman Park, on Kingman Park. I'm not aware of it. But we can certainly follow up with you.
Familiar with the pavilion for the flea market?
I'm sorry?
The pavilion for the flea market? Is that a different meeting?
That is not us either.
It's not you all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
let's make sure we circle back with you. If we don't have the answer, we can help you find it. So.
Okay, let me ask one other question. I did hear the gentleman earlier mentioning the playing fields.
Yes, ma'am. That is us. You
Okay,
nailed me on that one. I can't escape it.
Okay, I have one out of three.
1 out of 3 is not bad.
That's not bad. Thank you. Far as the playing fields, the asphalt, will you all be removing the asphalt, you know, that is, you know, for the playing fields, or are you going to be leaving the same asphalt there and building on top of?
Yes, ma'am. Good question.
The
So
existing
if you look at the visual, that is the new green fields, and some of them are artificial turf, but that is the green space that will replace that asphalt with. So we won't be playing on the asphalt, but they'll be converted to new fields.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And also,
Yeah,
sir,
I'm
if
gonna-
there's other, we can help you with the other 2
right.
questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Greg Blair. I live in the 200 block of 17th Street Northeast. I want to say thank you for the presentation tonight. I was at one of your prior presentations down at the Convention Center. I saw the progress from that one to this one, and I think it's notable how it's proceeded, and I want to say thank you for this. Most notably, removing the access road along the water. That was a big community concern, and I'm happy to see that's gone. It's been reconfigured for a different access point. I did just have a couple quick questions about this. Easy one first. When you're talking about like the park space and doing the landscaping, I know it's like a short-term goal for this, but will you be including like trees and other like elements that maybe help provide shade? Because you know it's a really big open space right now, and if you were just to kind of have flat green space everywhere, it might not be served the best. But,
Sure. No, you're right. And this is a preliminary site plan, but there'll definitely be a landscaping plan that we'll develop with this.
All right. And the second component of that, I've been talking a lot about the physical outlay of the spaces and how it'll be, you know, created and crafted. I haven't heard a lot of comments about how you actually intend it to be used. Who is going to be actually given access to these spaces? Do you guys have a plan in place for how people will be signing up for this? Is it going to be driven towards schools and things like that? Or there's also a lot of social sports leagues that would probably clamor to get access to spaces like this. Like, do you have a plan in place to address access to these facilities?
Great question. The direct, easy answer has not been determined yet. We've worked with early, not only in the design, but talking to Chris about what that playability looks like and the diversity, as you mentioned, a lot of the stakeholders are going to want to have access. So we need to figure out who the operator will be and then how we'll have access and market the space. To the other gentleman's point, there's also going to be a component of what will be community space versus what will be accessible for leagues and the like. So as I said at the onset, it's not going to solve all the ills, and so we're still going to have a tremendous amount of demand, but we will put a plan in place for who will operate it and how we'll have access to it as well.
Yeah. Just one last point. Related to the pedestrian bridges, I know that very recently the mayor designated Kingman Island as a state park or something along those lines. I know you guys said you haven't started actually any of the planning with regards to the bridges or anything like that? Okay, I know that they have allocated funds for like a phase 1 construction on the island. So I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but it probably would be some overlap for what you guys looking to do.
No, it's a great point. We're aware of the investment that the mayor announced, but we certainly will coordinate our efforts with it, so appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Valerie Hammond, Capitol Hill resident and member of DC Bicycle Polo. Kind of on the lines of his questions and comments, I was wondering, when you're looking for these proposals for folks that are going to come out and use this, I know you mentioned sustainability and financial feasibility, but what are other things you're looking at from these proposals?
So good point, and it's a good leading question for me. We're certainly going to have to accommodate the diversity of different programming. So I think we know there's a strong demand for soccer and youth soccer, but we want to make sure that we could accommodate other uses and diversity of uses because, frankly, all the different activities across the city don't have places to play. It's not going to be easy, and no one will be completely happy, but we do want to figure out a way that we can have truly multi-purpose uses on the facility. So that's something we're also going to contemplate. The one thing I will say also about these fields, this is the one concept that I am probably 99% sure will not financially be feasible. So we knew going in that there was going to have to be some way to operationally support these. And so to the question about how this is going to fund it, this one we know Events DC will likely play a role in the sustainable program or operations of this because it's the right thing to do to support youth sports or these youth activities or anybody, the multi-purpose activities, but we know it will not pencil out financially that will be made whole by operating this facility. So I just wanted to say that one we know will probably be the least likely to sustain itself.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
How are you?
My name is ANC Commissioner Carson Carr, 7F. 03 is my commission. And y'all next door, because we're right across the street with our ANC boundaries. And I've been to a couple of the meetings recently, and concerns that we have is what the gentleman said, and the lady was just in front of me about affordability and accessibility. And one of the things about accessibility is I see you have the footpath about to the island, but you know there is a great barrier to the rest of Ward 7 to come by foot to this area. So I've said it at those meetings, and I'm going to say it at this public meeting, that we need to be honestly, seriously find out a way that not only is by foot, but by bikes, because you cannot ride that bike safely under East Capitol Street. So you're cutting off a whole ward use of that area unless you're driving. And I see that you put that parking lot, and you know parking was one of the issues that I said because a lot of people in Ward 6 will be able to walk there, but we cannot. So I don't think that's going to be adequate parking for the people who just coming from Ward 7 to it and versus people coming from all over the city. And the other part is to make sure that the fields are accessible to DC residents, because a lot of things are not.
Thank you. So you and I have had several conversations, I acknowledged publicly, and thank you for the feedback. I think a couple things. Excellent point about the bike accessibility. So I probably spoke too generically when I talked about the transportation and the infrastructure required. it will be a tremendous harm to all of us if we spend all this time and energy and build this and it's not accessible to people. So we agree 100%, not only on the site, but even externally to the site, some of which we don't directly control. But to Ms. Krebs's question earlier, we're now going to actually coordinate with DDOT on a weekly basis for us to figure out what this entire transportation scheme looks like, even beyond our footprint, so we can see what the accessibility points are for even local, but also for people who are coming from even further away. The fields for DC, absolutely agree with you. We have to figure out how we're going to, again, knowing that this won't be operationally or financially feasible anyway, when we come up with a plan for operations, we're also going to have to figure out what use that we'll allocate for community use specifically that will be at no charge. And so it's on our radar. We haven't developed it yet, but we will make sure that we honor that requirement.
All right, and I just want to say one other thing, that I invite you to our February meeting for ANC 7F on February the 20th, because we're going to have the head of DDOT at that meeting.
Okay.
Because, you know, they get ready to redo that bridge.
Right.
And one of the things they showed us in the plan was making it accessible to get across and connect to the bike path.
Right.
I said, well, why are you stopping there?
Sure.
You're still cutting off the ward. So I invite you to the meeting so you,
All right, I will, as you've been direct with me, I will try to come. I will say by that meeting, he probably has seen enough of me, but I'll see if I can make it anyway. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here tonight. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there, I'm Gretchen McKeska, and I'm a Ward 6 resident, and I also work for a District Department of Energy Environment. I just wanted to follow up on the detail of the mayor's announcement, because it's very exciting that now Kingman and Heritage Island is a state conservation area. And when you look at your plans, the southern end has been designated as a critical wildlife area. That means there's not going to be much access, and certainly the access that will be in line with some of the endangered plants that have been found there. So when we see your bridge coming in from the south, I know that you'll be working with the Office of Planning and the District Department of Energy Environment to update the thinking on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Meeting with Tommy tomorrow.
Okay, good. I'm sure he will be talking about that. And now I want to put on my Ward 6 hat. I know I was at a previous meeting. I'm wondering if the swimming pools have been cut from consideration completely. My daughter's on DC Wave, has been for about 8 years. I swim with the DC Water Wizards. Rumsey Pool is packed. There is, you know, every minute of the day from 6:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, it is full. And we really could use more swimming facilities in this area of the city. So I know that you considered it, and then I saw it off in one of the previous meetings. So I just want to kind of put that back on the table. I don't know if you've been speaking with the swimmers or the DPR people, but there is a real need for swimming here and to get more of the youth so people are good swimmers in the community.
Thank you for your comments. So on the swimming, you know, we did wrestle, and obviously there's a competing programming elements that we had to balance. The one thing we said that we didn't think from programmatically from the size and magnitude of aquatic center probably made sense, but we do think there's probably an opportunity to address some swimming in the sports and recreation complex. And so that's where we hope that there'll be a component built in there that will address and have some availability or accessibility for swimmers. So that's what we're hoping. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Bill Matazeski. I'm a Ward 6 resident, and I write a monthly article about the Anacostia for the Hill Rag and East of the River newspapers. I want to talk a little bit about the bridges, and in particular, the bridge over to River Terrace, which I think everyone thinks is a great opportunity to bring that side together, along with improving the pavements along Benning Road, which I bicycled on today and just about busted myself. But at any rate, the issue that you mentioned was raising the bridges. That's not what I have heard. In fact, a lot of us like low bridges and are encouraged by the fact that the CSX bridge keeps the big boats downriver and allows the upriver to turn into what has become a remarkable place for high school and college crew teams to get out and practice in the afternoons. The issue on the bridges with the rowers is piers in the center of the river. They're concerned for the safety of these young people, that there not be an array of concrete piers placed in the center of the river. Your construction designs seem to be calling for that. It is a big issue right now at a new bridge being placed between the Aquatic Gardens and the Arboretum, and the bridge may have to be redesigned. There is a spectacular bridge without piers in Bladensburg that you can go look at. It's a pedestrian bridge at the Bladensburg Marina, and it's been put up without any piers or obstructions in the river itself. That's the sort of thing you should be thinking about, because it's an entirely viable option.
Fantastic suggestions, and we'll say conceptually, you know, we started to look at those bridges, but that design is in nowhere hard fast at all. And so, as I mentioned, some of the advisory committees that we want to form, I would love for you to participate in that and help us with that if you would. Thank you, sir. All right, so I think we are going to wrap up this portion of the discussion on the RFK redevelopment site, although I see a gentleman coming to the mic. Yes, sir. He's the last word person, I can tell.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Tyrell Holcomb, I'm a commissioner right here in Ward 7.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
Two things. Firstly, I'd like to bring up the point about jobs. I know that I heard a gentleman mention earlier about jobs. One of the things that I want to make sure happens with this project is, I think a lot of times with development and construction in the city, folks focus in on jobs during the project. And I want to make sure that there's a commitment to ensure that district residents have jobs once the project is completed. I'd like that commitment to be public tonight. Secondly, along those lines of jobs, I don't want us to just say, you know, we're ensuring that folks have jobs. We want to ensure that folks have opportunities that they can provide for their families. We know that the costs of housing and other things in the city continue to climb and rise. And so we want to ensure that we're putting district residents in the best places to succeed. My second emphasis is on the retail, restaurant, eatery options. I like to ensure that input from the community is given great weight, that being at the ANC level as well as the community at large, ensuring that the options that are coming, that the community has the ability to give input. For far too long, what I've seen, especially in Ward 7, is we have folks that come in and say, hey, this is what we're giving you, and they walk away. So we just want to ensure, I want to ensure, and I know my constituents want to ensure that it's a case where we have the opportunity to give input, and it's actually what we want to see and that we'll be willing to come to if we're given that opportunity to give that input.
Well, thank you for the comments. I'll start with the latter. Absolutely. And one of the things that we said is we want to set up the advisory committees for each of those elements, one of which being the market hall. So we would welcome anyone who wants to participate to give us input for that. The first point you made about jobs, couldn't agree more. I think not to, and I know you weren't diminished to construction jobs, but that's our first focal point out the gate.
Absolutely.
I think for Events DC, we have a very good track record for the projects we've worked on, whether it's been the convention center, the baseball stadium, and even now the entertainment sports arena. Like, we were very intentional about setting aggressive goals, not only for the workforce, but also for the local businesses. And so we're happy to report, just as an example, on construction, we have exceeded our CBE goals, and we also have 1 out of every 4 people on the job right now at the arena on construction are from 7 or 8. And so we certainly, as we do work in this community, we want to make sure that we address that on the construction side.
And so are you saying that you would make that exact same commitment that the folks that
I'm telling you what the performance is now. I would love it for be more, but if we start construction, you know, a year from now or next month, we will certainly target what we do, and I think our target was 10%. And so, you know, over time, we hope we can sustain that, but that's where we are now, and we would love it to be more. Part of the issue that you addressed is making sure that people are trained and ready for the job. The construction side is usually not as difficult at the apprentice level, but we've found from skilled workers it gets more difficult. So one of the things we want to do operationally, to your point, is make sure we get ahead of what those operational jobs may look like and actually put some training in place. We had pretty good success with the Marriott Marquis when we helped support, invest in that project, where we had cohorts where we actually had training to bring people on to work at that job. I will say we probably, when we started, had about 40% of the people working in that hotel, but the challenge we had was keeping people there in that hotel. And so even though we don't run the Marriott Marquis and we're not responsible for its operations, we're very much concerned about making sure we give people opportunities, to your point, working after construction, but we also have to figure out how we actually keep them in those jobs. And it may not be necessarily my direct bailiwick, but it's something that I'm passionate about as well. We're going to work with DOS on all our projects and figure out how we do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we're going to make sure we conclude this portion of the discussion. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and mainly for those who may not want to sit around for the operations discussion. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and quickly touch on what's happening on the campus now. For those who are leaving, thank you so much for coming tonight. Be safe going home. Thank you. 5-minute break.